Hey guys, the following is a conversation with a chap I now know as Yap, but in the group he's called Brian Barry. He's named Yap because he's quite talkative. This is the first in a series of conversations with Cheltenham UK philosophers, Chelsoph members, and we touch on some really, really fascinating areas within metaphysics, epistemology, ethics. And I think we found that we have quite a lot in common between our sort of worldviews. And so, hopefully this will encourage more to come forward. We've got the Zoom event coming up next week where there's, I think, 7 or 8 of us signed up. So we can sort of introduce ourselves. And this is cool. This is what we're about. It's about sort of sharing people's insights and ideas regarding the world, their place within it, and what we should do. So Yap was also the lead singer in a band called 1 Minute Silence. By all accounts, a really, really big band. And then just sort of decided that he wanted to go in a different direction. That appears to include philosophy and reflection and so on. So, really wide-ranging discussion. We talked about Yap's book as well that's coming out, the name of which I can't remember, forgive me, but he's explained some of it to me already and it looks fascinating stuff. So, and obviously some of the ideas were explored in this chat. So, cheers, guys. Enjoy. Speak soon. Bye. Hi, Yap.
Hello, Matt.
So, just point of order. So, you're actually called Brian Barry, aren't you, in the Facebook group? So,
well, Facebook made me change my name from Yap to Brian, the given name, a few years back, and then I've written to them many times, and they won't allow me to change it back to Yap. Right. But I was given the name Yap when I was about 10 or 11 by my older brother, and I've been Yap ever since.
Is it anything to do with talking?
Yes, I just got up when I was a kid.
You know what? I have a very similar story. So I remember being around the dinner table with my grandparents and the whole family, like we used to do, and they'd say, "Matt, please shut up." And there was one occasion where I said, "I just can't." I was actually crying. I was quite upset about it because I knew it actually really aggravated people, but I just sometimes I couldn't stop.
Yes, I've been told to shut up so many times, and I just didn't fit in that respect. And I have a hyper mind. I talk quickly. I think quickly. I mean, the fact that we talk, it's an extension of the fact that we think. You know what I mean? People say you talk a lot means I think a lot.
Yes. Is talking and thinking the same thing? I remember I used to talk about this a lot, actually.
Well, we can't talk unless we're thinking. We can't disconnect. Right now, I'm talking about the fact that we're talking about talking, and that's how the mind is driving it. It's an expression of it's an expression of mind, the embodied state of what talking is. So we talk our embodied states. They're just expressions, extensions of the embodied state. That's what talking is. So it's all mind related.
Yeah. And it's logical, isn't it? It's kind of speech is. I mean, it's proper. Every sentence is a sort of proposition, isn't it? We're assigning some sort of property to something. Is that right?
Yes, I mean, we talk, like I believe we talk, like I said, speaking is an extension of our embodied state. We embody reality, and we're structured to fit into reality. Now we can walk off the path. We can sort of negate that structure and talk, crap. Racism is a negation of the structure. The classism is built on the negation of the structure. Monarchy is a negation of the correct structure, the logical, rational structure. So long as we're aligned with the correct structure, we talk accordingly, and the more aligned we are with reality, the more we can talk reality up in the correct manner.
Just one other thing I was going to say, Yap, actually, if I look at you funny, it's because I can't find my glasses this morning, because I normally wear glasses, so this is a little bit fuzzy, but funnily enough, I think my eyes are actually adjusting, so maybe there's a case for just not using my glasses sometimes. Could you give us a bit of a background to yourself, sort of where you're from, how you ended up getting into philosophy, but also you're a poet and an artist and a musician, so could we get a bit of a backstory? Is that cool?
Yeah, well, I'm Irish. I'm over here. I still have my accent. I'm over here 37 years living in London. I grew up in a small town, Irish family, Irish music background, very artistic background. So I was blessed in that respect. It's a very wealthy background to come from when you're involved in art and music. And my dad was a huge influence on my life, as was my mom. But my dad, he's an artist, a musician, and he's been acknowledged in Ireland by the Irish president on a couple of occasions for his contribution to Irish heritage. I mean, we were a working class family, but like I said, to me, that was wealth. That was a very wealthy environment to grow up in. I moved to England when I was 19 with the goal of becoming famous, joining a band. I grew up playing Irish music, but I loved rock music, and I wanted to be in a rock band. And it wasn't actually so much about the music. It was about expression. You know, the name Yap. I've always had an anger towards the world, and I just felt that would give me the channel I needed to scream at the world. And we started a band. Eventually, we got a record deal with Virgin Records, well, V2, Virgin 2. We were kind of thought of as the British Rage Against the Machine, I suppose, in the magazines.
Yeah.
And, you know, we got a record deal, toured the world, you know.
Sorry, what were you called again?
We were called 1 Minute Silence.
Yeah. I
mean, we toured the world with bands like Machine Head and Slipknot and Incubus, and played with Marilyn Manson and Prodigy, and, you know, phenomenal experience. But I dreamt it as a young man, you know, to be famous, to be on TV and radio, all the fame. But I got lost in the circus, and I grew up. And on the road, my drummer his mum was an English literature teacher, university teacher, and he had a degree in English literature, and he became my first mentor. You know, I failed in school, and the schools failed me rather, but I failed in school, and you know, he became a mentor, and he really helped me, and he really helped me develop my mind and all these thoughts I was having, these hyper thoughts that made no sense to me. And you know, so I was grateful. You know, we spent 10 years on the road together, and you know, I moved from Chomsky into Thoreau and into Kant, and all because of, you know, Eddie. I'll always be grateful for that. It's the time he gave me, and we had the time on the road. But anyway, the band, I woke up one day and I just didn't want to be part of the circus. I really felt it was claustrophobic. It's not a natural state to be in. I could talk about it for hours and, you know, break it all down, but I just got tired of the circus. I couldn't fit in. I couldn't reconcile music to business and to the, you know, the claustrophobic circus that I was in. It's just too much. It's too much. I mean, I often tell people, like, we all like a compliment. You know, every human being, you know, that was a nice dinner, or that's a good painting, or that's a lovely song. Every human likes a compliment. But when you can be, you know, over complimented, it becomes claustrophobic. And if you got 200 fans backstage, and they all mean well, they're all beautiful beings, they all want to tell you that you're their favorite band, that's their favorite song, but you're in a kind of this hamster loop of, oh, you know, you're oh yeah, cool, thank you, and compliments themselves can, you know, just smother you. That was just one aspect of it. I just didn't want it was a noise. But also my brain, I often felt, you know, when I left the band, I told some journalists, you know, that the world stage, that it wasn't big enough for me. I wanted a metaphysical stage. I felt something, I felt a calling. I really did feel connected to something bigger and, you know, something more important that I couldn't grasp. And the world of fame didn't give me the comfort that I desired. I wanted to escape normality, as many young people do. Normality, there's nothing wrong with normality. I realize that now. But I'm wanting to escape it when I was younger. And, you know, the world of fame and music, it didn't give me that. It didn't give me any comfort. So I left the band. And, you know, look, there's many avenues I could go down about my story, but I've always
could I just ask a quick question there? Just it's something fascinating about what you were saying about the fans, because because I grew up as a rock music fan. Right? So I might well have been one, not at your gigs, but at various other gigs. I'm one of those screaming, adoring fans, headbanging, and you know, putting my head in speakers and daft things like that. I've still got tinnitus now from all this stuff.
Me too.
I'm not surprised you're literally churning this stuff out, you know. But and so thanks for that for starters, because I think music and community and all this kind of stuff's important. There's something kind of special about the metal and the rock community as well. From my point of view, it is a more spiritual scene, I think, than some others, right?
Yes,
possibly. Yeah. Or perhaps a little bit more rebellious as well, or it's, you know, it does sound angry, as you pointed out earlier. But I just wanted to talk, because I started having a problem being a fan, right? So it's almost the inverse of your situation. I started thinking, hang on, why are we hero worshipping these people?
Yes,
they're not that good, you know. I mean, you know, and then I thought, actually, you know, then I started getting into local music, listening to people with banjos and fiddles and all this kind of stuff, thinking, actually, they're just as good as bloody Black Sabbath, you know. In fact, possibly even better technically, if you did the math, right? And so I had developed a bit of a problem with the celebrity culture, if you like, and which still lives on to this day. It's obviously fused into something a bit weirder with social media, but that does my head in. And the thought of people kind of devoting their lives and having shrines to particular people on the wall and stuff, it's with religious fervor, you know. There's something about that does my head in from a kind of, I don't want to be in that kind of collective. It looks daft. Or am I just being a grumpy old kid?
you know, I went through exactly that stream of thought myself many times. You know, celebrity, what Buddha said was, you know, the Dalai Lama said was fake sounds. It's one thing to cure cancer or land on the moon, and that's kind of an indirect fame. But the way we revere certain individuals, pop stars, tennis stars, movie stars. Well, what about the nurse What about the midwife? What about the firefighter? What about the carpenter?
The real heroes, yeah.
You know, and you know, what about the individuals who study how the worms see in black and white so we can better understand the human eye? You know, the unsung heroes. Why don't we revere those individuals?
Yeah.
You know, and reverence should go to our entire species and our entire legacy of the journey we've been on, but rather than isolating certain individuals. And, you know, like I said, bowing down to them, it speaks of the person, you know, that it speaks to the individual who bows down. There's a kind of a weakness of mind, I believe, in seeing everyone, you know, on the level. Everyone is beautiful. If you play music, you're beautiful. And if you're a nurse, you're beautiful, of equal measure, equal value. I truly mean that. And, you know, and we need music too. You know, the nurse comes home from a hard day's work and she needs to put on some music and relax. You know, it's all one. It's part and parcel of the same big web. But yeah, the idea we would, you know, worship and bow down, it's just, there's a lot of ego. It frightens me, the idea of that.
Was it Nietzsche who said music is the noblest art? And because it seems to touch people on a level that other art forms don't, you know, to the point you hear a song, you're in tears, or you're in, you know, and I get this kind of nostalgia associated with music as well. There's certain tracks I can't listen to now.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. They get me on certain subjects, and you know, so music seems to penetrate really deeply into us more than perhaps other mediums do.
Because I think music, more than all the other art forms, has a set of, you know, it's with harmonics. You know, we can just sort of chill to all the harmonics and meditate, and it kind of transports us into a different place. But, you know, our mind is loaded when we listen to music. You know, music will take us into memories and into past experiences, into trauma experience, but it'll also take us into transcendental experiences. It just depends on the mindset that we bring to the music. Yeah. You know, the music in the mosh pit is a catharsis. It lets out the anger of the week, of the year. You know, we come out smiling from the mosh pit. It just depends on what you get off on. But like I said, it's easy, you know, waxing lyrical about philosophical ideas is very raw. And to me, that's the music of life that really lifts me and has stimulated me, you know. So if you know the depths of philosophy, I mean, you know, Immanuel Kant or Henry Thoreau, for me, Thoreau was just the ultimate musician in terms of true word. He's, you know, he harmonized me with the sacredness of the universe. So we could say there's music in that. But like I said, but when it comes down to sound, you know, and we're just sort of, we sit back and we meditate on sound, like I said, it can transport us. It has the advantage of having all the harmonics, so the ear tunes in, and it gives us that sense of solace and belonging in a very peaceful way. So I think music has that in it. That's
interesting, isn't it? I mean, perhaps is music more of a, I don't know, do we participate less in a way with music? If we're using our tactile sense, we have to move our body and touch things. If we're watching something, we have to focus on different bits of it and stuff like that. You know, with music, you can just literally just lie back and do nothing and just soak it in, can't you? I wonder whether it's because there's less effort involved. It penetrates more. I don't know.
There's less effort, and in one sense, we don't have to think with it, even though we bring a certain mindset to it. But we can also disengage from the noise of the day and let music take us somewhere. Whereas we're listening to poetry, we have to actually we have to direct our attention to it. Or we're watching a movie, we have to direct our attention. Even a conversation like this, we can drift from it. Obviously, you know, the human mind can drift, but we have to direct our attention. But with music, you can just you can just lie back and let go, and so it can just, you know, transport you.
So yeah, can I ask about what was the name of your mentor that you described? Because I love those figures in people's lives, people that have guided you, you've been there with you when you've had these deep questions and sort of suggested reading. What was his name again?
His name was Eddie Stratton, and he was the drummer in our band.
Yeah.
And I'm still in touch with the band. We're great friends, but myself and Eddie, our roads have went separate ways. You know, a story I won't go into, but I was, like I said, Eddie had a degree in English literature, and it was Eddie who first said to me, you know, Yap, you're a philosopher. You're asking questions. We were reading Chomsky, for example, and he said, I want to go beyond. But I said, the structures of language that allow us to, you know, enter war, the mindset. I wanted to get into understanding why the mindset would be so corrupt and so on, just rather than just reading the data, the raw data about the American empire and the corruption in South America and so on and so on. And nobody had ever said that to me before. You know, like in school, I was just, you know, a disgruntled young man, and I just didn't engage. And, you know, I didn't know that my hyper thoughts were philosophical thoughts. You know, nobody. I'm self-educated. I've been educated in a silo, apart from Eddie. You know, so he was the one he walked in one day and he gave me a book on Henry Thoreau, and I just fell in love with Thoreau immediately. And then, you know, one thing led to the other, and then I found myself in Immanuel Kant. And the way I often explain Immanuel Kant, it was like I'd always had music in my head, and I didn't know there was chords for it. And somebody said to me one day, C, G, E, F, D.
Yeah.
There's actually chord structures and rhythmical structures for what you're thinking about. Whereas when I read Kant, axiom, a priori, a posteriori, I didn't understand there was a language. And I realized, I mirrored myself. I found myself in his complexity. I obviously didn't understand it, but I understood enough to know I was really drawn to it. I felt for the first time ever there was a mirror to look at, where I could reflect and find myself in it. I went, that's how I think. And obviously that led me on the journey to where I am today.
Yeah, and in some sense, I mean, I struggle with Kant, to be honest.
We always struggle with Kant,
Critique of pure reason, because I think I made the mistake of expecting to be able to understand it as I went through. Whereas I think you've got to read the whole thing and just slowly digest it and sort of reflect on it. That's how I kind of started getting him in the end, was to stop tackling it. I was like tackling every sentence, thinking, hang on, what does that mean? What does it mean? But you just got to just let it flow in. But I was just going to ask you, what are your philosophical views? Can we perhaps do you have a particular metaphysical leaning, or what's your view on? So should we start with that? Do you have any metaphysics that you tend to align with, or not?
Well, obviously, on the journey in philosophy, we go down the rabbit hole. You're going to end up in the metaphysical rabbit hole, because we're going to ask the fundamental questions of what are we, who are we, what's meaning, all of those. And how are we plugged in on the inside? I suppose that's one of the fundamental questions. How are we, what's mind, what's body, all of those questions, what I mean? Like, are they separate? Are they one and the same thing? And, Kant sort of was my springboard. But it's easier, I think, to start with where I am, and then we can work into the other philosophers, if you like, from there.
Sure. Yeah.
Identity, like I've always, what are we? We're trying to identify ourselves, our place in the universe. We're trying to identify the universe and its beginning and so on, and its purpose, and is there a purpose? So, what are we? And I've always wanted to identify, I wanted to understand what I am while I'm alive on this planet. And I've always felt plugged into something, an identity. What am I? But if we go down the rabbit hole using the mode of identity, we identify the molecule, we identify, the structures of DNA, we identify the atoms. But once we're down at Planck's constant, once we're down at the quantum pond, we lose form, the mind can't identify body. But the mode of identification still stands. It's still fit for purpose. Just because we can't identify it, the mode is still there to continue to try and identify things. Okay? So that's one of the modes.
We can identify the limits as well, can't we? We can identify the limit of our current comprehensibility. So what's beyond that is identified as non-identifiable.
Yes, it's non-identifiable, but we're stuck on the chessboard. We're in a Socratic position on the chessboard. We're ignorant, but we know we're ignorant, and that gives us there's a certain amount of intelligence in that ignorance of knowing that we're stuck on the chessboard. So what's the next move? And we're not going to make a sudden move without knowing where we're going. We're at that stage in our evolution to move smartly and correctly around the chessboard, so we can line up everything in the correct manner. So I've been looking. I probably digress many times, but that's trying to put a picture together. I've always wanted to systemize the mind. I've been fascinated with systems. How do we systemize systems? Okay, we have many, many systems. How do we? So I wanted to find a blueprint. My journey, I wanted to understand the mind. I wanted to have a blueprint for the mind. And we have blueprints for everything. And we have blueprints for getting to Mars. We have blueprints for making chewing gum. We have relative blueprints for understanding the bee in the hive. We have blueprints for the brain, and we have blueprints for the body, the organs, for the kidney. We have blueprints for making cars. We have blueprints for everything. So we're systemizing blueprints, but we have no absolute ontological blueprint for the mind. We don't.
You couldn't say that psychology does that, could you? Because it's sort of a bit of
too many holes in it. Too many holes. Okay, there's we've certain understanding of psychology and how we line up with reality and interact with one another, but it still doesn't tell us what we are. At the end of the day, in the existential sense, we do not know what we are. Man and woman, human is a loose idea at best. It has no fixed predicate. Okay, when we've never grounded it. We've assumed a position.
Okay? It's a contingent fact, isn't it? As opposed to
we're part of an evolutionary process.
Yeah,
and we can't. At the end of the day, we have an intuitive line in our heads, and we can't draw a line around the body and say, "Here I am." In a fixed vacuum for one particular moment. We just can't do that. Okay, we can't identify that framework. We can't atom break the body. Once we get down to the atoms, it's gone. And even on the outside, even on the external side, we can't draw a line there because it's continuously moving.
Yeah.
Okay, but we can move in motion with that. The mind allows us to move in motion with things. Motion is one of the modes of the mind. We can move. Nature is in motion, and we move in motion with nature. Okay, and we're systemizing all the time, and we're trying to identify. So anyway, the mind. my work on a blueprint has brought me to the fact that we systemize through a set of a priori modes, identification being one of them. I'll just run through a few of the modes, categorization. You and I, since we began this chat, have moved through so many different categories of thought, from music, to philosophy. We've moved through many categories. We're moving through the category of category right now. We moved through the category of identification. So we're moving through categories, and we cannot communicate without categories, without identification. Another mode I love is adding, the idea we can add things up. Now, people don't really give, this is a utility of the mind that we don't really give much kudos to. I mean, we add up the whole tract of evolution. We can add up World War II. We can add up capitalism. We can add Rome onto capitalism. Adding is a phenomenal mode. Without adding, now you're trying to add up what I'm saying about adding. You're adding up that we categorize and identify. So my point is, I
want to add to the conversation. I want to add the fact
you want to add to the conversation.
In some sense, we're defined by addition, aren't we? It's kind of like what we're prepared to add into the system, both biophysically as well as spiritually, or metaphysically. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. But so the point was, we have a set of universal modes. If you and I were speaking in Russian right now or in Chinese right now, the mode of categorization would be enabled, the mode of adding, the mode of identification. These are universal modes because, the Russians add things up. The Chinese unify, and the Chinese, categorize things. They add things up. They look for precision in things. They extend and expand into things. These are all intuitive modes, what I call utility modes, modes that are necessitated to the mind, through the mind, for thinking systemically. So so in a universal sense, we have a set of systemic modes that allow us to systemize and thus synthesize our positions in reality. And I believe these modes give life to the human condition in a new way. There are universal modes that give magnitude to the mind. Magnitude is another mode to grab the magnitude of the cell, to grab the magnitude of the universe, to grab the magnitude of Kant, magnitude. And so like this, there's many modes, unification.
So just briefly, are you aware when you're transitioning from one mode to another?
No, that's one.
Can one be aware of that?
Yeah, that's something I'm looking for, is what I call the currency between modes. Okay, we can oscillate so quickly between modes. We're adding, we're categorizing. That's one thing I've been looking for in my search to understand the mind. Okay, there's a lot of, I believe I can give agency through the modes to consciousness, if you will. But we have eons to go. Our species is lost in the. Sometimes we think we're on the cusps of things, and to a degree we are. But I don't believe we're anywhere. I think we're probably millions of years away from fully grounding ourselves in the ontology of reality. We can ask the questions long before the answers come along. It's easier, to ask what's this body long before you realize there's DNA making part of it, part of its makeup. Yeah, it's easy to ask the questions, where are we, what are we? And I think the first thing to do, and even Kant understood, is to get into the driving seat, is to understand the compass of north, south, east, and west of self. Like, how does the mind engage with reality? How is the mind structured, prescribed to fit into reality? Because until we can answer that, until we can put on the headset in the correct manner, we don't know what we are. We don't know what's driving.
This is fascinating. So it's almost like a metaphysical psychology in a way. It's like saying, well, exactly as you pointed out earlier, we have all of these descriptions and models of the physiology, of things like astrology. We've got all these models everywhere that explain how stuff works, but we don't have anything that really tackles the mind. And I'm just wondering, is there a therapeutic component to this? So is there a chance that if we have a better map of it and have a better awareness of these different categories of sort of utility and so on and so forth that you mentioned, can we navigate the world in a better, safer, more sort of illuminating way? I mean, so can we live better as a result of this?
Well, I mean, yes. I mean, can we live better? I mean, first of all, we're a scattered head. We're a headless chicken at the moment. We're scattered because we've come out of the darkness of a chimp head, if you will. 7 million years since we split from chimp, if you will. Yeah. We've had to move and morph and come up into language. There was a time we couldn't have these conversations, even if we were thinking about it.
But a lot of our behavior is still based on what we learned as chimps in the tree. Yeah, absolutely. That's right.
It's still mapped into us. But we're at a point in our evolution now where we have relative language, and a relative understanding of language, so we can talk about the complexity of things, where we can, engage with concepts like concept and complexity and evolution and dimension and process and so on. So we have this language now, we're fish with an alphabet. We're monkeys at the interface of metaphysics, okay? We're at the interface of understanding it, we're not even, the body doesn't seem to be the case, okay? So we're just taking baby steps. We're in an embryonic state of development, and, we're in our adolescent years, if you like, you know, we're teenagers trying to grow up.
What is it that gives you that sense that there's so much more to go? I mean, what is it? What is the intuition that you have that says that we're not at the cusp, at the edge of knowing everything? Because back in the 90s, it felt like we were, you know, it felt like we were going to have a unified field theory. We understood the DNA and that was going to explain everything. So what gives you the sense that we're not?
Well, I don't think, God, it's hard to answer that. Well, you know, I mean, look at, you know, Planck has taken us down to Planck's constant, you know, taken us completely out of the picture. Hoffman believes we're part of a simulation. You know, Gödel has turned mathematics upside down. We still don't know the binding problem, the hard problem of consciousness. You know, we really are. Yeah. You know, we understand the brain in what way? Clusters of neurons firing, clusters of millions and millions. You know, we don't even understand the cell. Okay, we thought we were close to understanding the cell. Now we realize the cell has its own environment. We just don't know. I mean, we're a smart species. We're a smart monkey. There's no doubt about that. Yeah. But you know, we don't even understand dimension. We don't understand the mind. We don't understand how many dimensions we're wrapped up in. We're in a dimensional knot, if you will. Okay, we just don't understand. And we have this. We have language now to address these things and ask ourselves, you know, how complex is it?
Yeah.
So we don't know. And like I said, that's why I step back from it all. I step back from it all and don't, you know, I engage for, you know, I love all the different fields of science and philosophy. It's all beautiful. It's all sacred. It's phenomenal. I respect everybody involved, even people who are wrong. They're beautiful for trying. You know what I mean? Like, we're all wrong by degree and hopefully right by degree. The fact that we're trying to philosophize as a species says something about us. We're trying to understand our nature. So I don't believe we understand what we are yet. That's why the journey, there's so many more years to go. Okay, like, we've assumed the position that we're human, and we just don't understand what that. It's a loose premise at best. It hasn't got fixed predicates. So I step back from it all, and like I said, I wanted to create a blueprint. How are we engaging? Kant was about that. How are we structured? How are we necessitated to think with reality? Okay, so like I said, so we found a bed of modes. Now I believe the bed of modes. I often tell people, I'm not a body of limbs and organs. Rather, I'm a set of systemic modes floating in an ocean of dissipating variables. And until I know more, we are that. Okay. So I'm not going to ground a body. I can only ground myself in a set of modes. All I know of myself. And I genuinely think this way. I mean, we've been conditioned since the day we're born to think with body, with face, with eyes, with environment. And it's such a heavy conditioning. It's wed into us. You know, it's mapped into us. And it's very hard. We can disengage through meditation from ego. Yeah. We can disengage and get a sense that we're connected to the whole, you know, this interconnected web. But that doesn't really tell us anything. It just alludes to something. So I mapped the mind on the inside. Well, how do we think like Kant? And so, like I said, I've isolated a set of modes, and I believe I'm a set of modes until I know more. What is this set of modes? What is it enabled to do? What does it fit into? Is it an inward journey we have to go on now? Because there is no outward journey. You know, going to the moon doesn't take us anywhere. It just moves us to a different seat. I mean, it takes us to the moon, but
with the journey, it might take you somewhere experientially. It might give you a new perspective on things mentally, you know. But I take your point, though. I take your point. Going somewhere geographically isn't necessarily going to help when you are an unbounded sort of conscious being, sort of thing. You know?
Well, if we were transported right out to another planet, all our top scientists and philosophers, and we met another alien species, and they could speak to us in our language, we wouldn't be able to answer what we are ontologically, phenomenologically. We don't know. We managed to get here in a big transporting ship, but we don't know. You see, we don't know.
So do you accept that premise, though, the idea that we've been chiseled by evolution, though? So do you accept that, or do you think there's some assumptions in there as well? Or
again, with evolution, look, I believe in it. You know, we've evolved. We've evolved.
It looks like we're hardwired to deal in the spatio-temporal realm, as you're putting it. And that's why it's so hard to overcome, because
we're hardwired, but we're conditioned to think that as long as we condition to think we're humans, if we relate, you see, I don't relate. That's where Kant made the fundamental mistake. As long as we think we're humans, there's a limitation to being human. Because the mind, the a priori tools engage with an empirical environment and a phenomenon. We engage with the world of phenomenon. We're structured to see this. Kant understood this. We're structured to see this in a certain way.
And this speaks to the ethics of metaphysics and how it actually makes us feel. You know, and again, speaking to what you said earlier about if we know ourselves better, then we can presumably do a better job of living. Sorry, but it's exciting stuff. This is really exciting stuff.
So say we stand back and as long as we keep thinking we're man and woman, then we're going to be limited in that box. But I believe we're a set of systemic modes, and I believe the modes themselves give agency to the thing in itself. See, I believe now we're the thing in itself. Like, you know, if you like, you know, we're all God. You know, we're all a God, a conscious I, wearing a biological chemical conduit, and it's trying to rise. And it got lost in the dark of a monkey head, trying to rise into language. So you're
an idealist?
I mean, yes, I suppose. Well, yes, I'm an idealist. I believe that we're all subjected to a metaphysical objective structure, and we're trying to evolve and climb onto that. And I don't believe in man or woman. I believe in the conscious I. Like I said, I believe, that's the ideal. If you to put it like that, yeah, we like I said, we can't identify man and woman. I can identify with the mode of identification. I can identify with all the systemic modes. Something is trying to systemize itself. And this system is one ring to rule it all. This system is responsible for all fields of knowledge, whether it's brain surgery, whether it's chemistry, any field, getting to Mars. We systemize everything. We systemize history. We're trying to systemize what we're saying to one another. We're in a systemic state. The systemic modes allow us to abstract. Abstraction is the dominant I. And we understand in the abstract lens, man doesn't hold as part of a process. So we have to stand back then and ask ourselves, are we the thing that systemizes? Are we the thing that abstracts? And there's no body on that. So, to me, evolution is an inward journey. Part of the ideal is an inward journey. There's nowhere to go out here. Now, out here, we have to understand the exponential energy so we can utilize them and live, and our bodies can thrive in the best way possible, because the conduit wants to survive. And we all have a certain sense of individuality through the colorful ego. As long as we're not arrogant, we all get this sort of idiosyncratic sense of self and this colorful sense of ego. And there's nothing wrong with that, because it helps us thrive, because the body has to thrive to survive, so the I can pass through it. Okay, and the I is trying to grow up. I believe evolution is a story of total resurrection for consciousness. This idea, consciousness is not finished yet. Consciousness is only starting to wake up in the human head right now and put itself back together to realign. And it needs a set of systemic modes which are fit for purpose, for alignment. So my question is going to be, are we that set of systemic modes? And the implications for that are huge, because we're not the body, we're not the nation, we're not black and white. Okay. In the egotistical sense, we are out here.
We're not mammals.
We're not mammals. Well, everything outside of the system, everything outside of consciousness is an illusion. It's a temporary illusion.
Yeah. Even mainstream sort of materialist scientists, neuroscientists are agreeing with that now. So Anil Seth would say pretty much the same thing. He'd say our reality is a controlled hallucination. That seems to be supported by the idea of things like psychedelics as well, which we can't really explain, but we know that all of the contents and forms and stuff could be replaced with stuff that's not being perceived in the physical world, right? So
it's a controlled hallucination. So that's what I was saying about understanding where we are and how many millions of years we have to go. If that, just say that premise is correct, excuse me, that it is a controlled hallucination. The depth of understanding, the complexity of trying to understand that is unfathomable right now. You know what I mean? But the fact that we're monkeys waking up to it says something about us. That the fact that we're monkeys with the ability to, we're necessitated with the tools to systemize that potential position.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Gödel's incompleteness theorem, now I don't understand it mathematically, but conceptually, it says something about consciousness. It says, consciousness is so complex, the system within us is so complex that it's able to map this reality with mathematical models, but then it can map the fact that the mathematical models don't actually hold in the ontological sense. Okay, that speaks volumes about the weight of us as a monkey head. Okay, we were a species waking up, and there's something beautiful about being lost in the complexity of it all, because we're up for the job when it comes to understanding the puzzle, and we want to understand it, and we're driven by a will inside of us to understand it. And
do you think we're truly disconnected from each other? Because I tend to think that, you touched on this earlier, actually, Jaap, that this idea that the boundaries between us and the world aren't quite as crisp as we might think. And I touched on this with Dennis Noble the other day, and he took issue with some of Carl Friston's thinking around the Markov boundary, or the Markov blanket, saying that he doesn't necessarily believe you can really distinguish between inside the blanket and outside, because we're extremely poor. As you say, my body is the world, isn't it? It is the physical world. It's completely continuous with it. There's a continuous exchange of information and substances and so on and so forth. So for me, this sense of independence and complete separation from the world, that is illusory. That seems to be completely illusory. And so for me, when I begin to perceive something, say I look at the moon, right? The standard kind of Newtonian sort of matrix, if you like, suggests that that's millions and millions of miles away from me. It can't affect me in any way whatsoever. But for me, when I see anything, any form of phenomena, I'm deeply involved with whatever that is, right? And kind of much as Donald Hoffman would say that, yes, there's something that looks like the moon there that's not there when we're looking at it.
Yes.
I think that thing is probably agential. I think everything is agential. That seems to have some kind of purposive role in the world. So I mean, I wonder whether some of this, there's a dotted line to Whitehead, and his thinking around things like concrescence and that kind of creation, if you like.
Yes, yes.
Any thoughts on that stuff? But
yeah, I don't understand Whitehead enough to comment on Whitehead,
Yeah.
But yes, I don't know where the disconnect is. We are part of an environment. We are something. We're wearing, a billion years of evolution.
So actually, the point I was trying to get to, I'm wondering whether actually this whole planet is one single intelligence.
Whether it's one, well, yeah, isn't that the question? If it's one single intelligence, I think the conscious I in it, trying to evolve through it, is the one single intelligence.
And so that's the eye of the world. It's like Schopenhauer's kind of eye of the world.
Yes, it's eye, transcendental ego, the eye, the eye of the eye of consciousness. I believe consciousness is prior, okay, and I believe consciousness, it needs a conduit to pass through. It has evolved in this environment and it had to adapt to this environment, and it uses its systemic lens to adapt to this environment, and it's connected to everything. There is no disconnect. We know that there is no, in the a priori tools, there is no disconnect. And we're connected to know each other. The further we don't know each other on the outside, we can have a sense of the other person, but we know each other by going. The further into yourself to go, the more you connect the deeper realms with the other person. We're all connected to the deepest core. We're an embodied evolution.
That can't be severed, can it? So we're all rooted.
There's nowhere to sever. Nobody can draw the disconnect. You can't sever. Where is the disconnect? Okay, now through ego, and we do have this impression that we're separate, that we're walking. Like, a good way of thinking of separation for me is if you watch two fish swimming in an ocean, okay, in a pond, and the two fish swimming along, and they're a foot apart from each other, so there's a foot of space between them, but there's not. It's filled with water. There's no space between them. Okay, that applies to our environment too. There is no space between us. Okay, when you get really down to the quantum realm, there's no space between us. Okay, there's no space between our bodies. Okay, now there is a sense, like I said, because of conditioning, in this environment, that we're separate individuals. But when we go into the core structures, when we look at the deepest way of how we're structured, how we're prescribed and necessitated to fit reality, there's no separation. And the systemic tool, once again, allows us to see this. The systemic tool, to me, is right now is what we need to be grounding and refining. It's like trying to refine the Rubik cube in our head. How does it work? How does it turn? Okay, and I have certain aspects of it. I found certain modes in the Rubik cube, but I need to turn all the squares in the correct manner to understand how it works as a complete unit. Okay, so I believe we have to understand that will align us with the ontological verse and pull us into it. And I believe, teleologically speaking, that we're on a journey. We're on a journey to become the one conscious I again. Now, we can't imagine that any more than two amoebic fish that crawled up in the beach and they were having a chat a billion years ago could imagine that it would turn into giraffes and ants and human beings. Okay, that journey they had to go on. And I believe, our journey is inwards. We have to go inwards. And right now, we don't know how to disconnect from body. Okay, because we're so conditioned to live in it, to thrive in it. Okay, but through meditation, meditating through structure, I believe, is the way forward. We meditate through structure rather than just meditate and disengage, which is one way to meditate. To meditate means to move towards the core, but we move towards the core, and what? Do we just sit there and just keep alluding to the fact that it all feels interconnected? But there's structure in there, a priori structure. So that structure, to me, the headset, the systemic modes give us the structure to align in the correct manner. So maybe our next stage of evolution then is a journey inwards with millions of years to go. We're on a new beach.
Yeah, because there's a danger, isn't there, that you do some metaphysics, do some research, mental, physical, or otherwise, and you're just producing another model or another sort of catalogue of words that we can then sort of make noises about,
Yes.
But you're saying actually there's a possibility of settling upon these actual, you say a priori structures. So these are real things, right? Real properties of consciousness.
I don't know. I mean, I can't say anything with absolutes. All I know is we systemize thought. All I know is one ring. The system is, to me, is one ring to rule it all, and in the darkness bind them. Yeah. So we have one system, and I can say with absoluteness that the system is responsible for all fields of knowledge, because if we couldn't systemize, square things up, we couldn't combine with the correct configuration of things. For example, I like the idea of configuration, like things don't square up and something doesn't figure. The class system doesn't figure. Capitalism doesn't figure. The monarchy doesn't figure. Racism doesn't figure, because we can't combine with the correct configuration. Okay, so all knowledge is about, all correct knowledge fields are about combining.
I like that. There's something really important about that. You know, I've come across this before. The idea that basically under investigation, evil is always illogical. You know, it's like there's. Do you know what I mean? There's always something wrong with it.
Always illogical. It's always pathology. It's always irrational. Absolutely, we walk from the correct structure. We walk off the path. We walk. We move away from the grain of life.
Yeah, which ties with what Socrates was saying, because he said that evil was basically just ignorance. It was just people not knowing.
It's just not knowing. That's all it is. There's no evil presence like the force in the world. There's no evil, you know, creeping present, you know, that permeates things and turns people evil. That's just Hollywood. And you know. So yeah, it's you know. But yeah, so look at, just to go back to that. So we come, you know, to me, we systemize, we combine with configurations to find the correct, to square things up. And this is responsible whether we're Russian or Chinese or English, anything, you know, wherever. That's one way. It's a universal way. So this system needs more refinement. I believe I can wax lyrical about it all day long, and I keep grounding the fact that I believe it's a thing in itself. But I can't know with absoluteness. How can I? But I want to me, I believe we should give light to the thing that maps itself into everything. Now, there's holes in everything. There's holes in chemistry. There's holes in biology. There's holes in psychology. There's holes in history. There's holes in everything. But the thing that knows there's holes in things is fit for filling in those holes. So again, we're back to that. What is this system that allows us to see everything? It's an observational eye. It's almost omniscient. It can see back along the tracks of evolution and follow all the inferential patterns. It can hold traction with inferential patterns. Okay, that's how we see. We see internally. Sight is internal. We see around structured inferences. That's how we see. So we have a systemizing eye that allows us to combine with configurations and systemize along the tractions of inferential connections, if you will. That's how we see. So this system, to me, is what we are. You know, we are in the dark. Okay, we have this. We're not out here in the body. We're in the metaphysical darkness. When we close our eyes and disengage, and we sit in this tiny little, who am I inside it all? You know what I mean? Like it's almost like a solipsistic world in there. Yeah, we're disconnected. We're trying to find ourselves. We're fish in a dark ocean. We're fish in a dark ocean. These eyes don't see anything. The mind sees that these eyes don't see anything.
You know, when I was a kid, so some of what you're discussing now is really, it's sort of giving me the tingles, because I used to ponder some of this stuff when I was a kid. Yeah. And I used to feel, it used to freak me out, right? I used to think, hang on, why can't people see the contents of my mind? And I, you know, even silly little things, like I remember if I had a buzz in my ears, I remember asking my mum to say, can you hear that? You know, listen, there's a buzz in my, and can you hear that in my, and she said, don't be daft, I can't hear what's in. And that troubled me. It was almost as though there was a little part of me that could remember something otherwise. You know, I mean, that's the spiritual kind of hippie trippy interpretation, but the world seemed just strange. I couldn't understand why people weren't jumping for joy, right? Well, why is everyone taking everything so bloody seriously?
That's right. Yeah. And the fact is, and a flip on that is people don't take themselves seriously. You know, You know what I mean? They're getting drunk tonight because they don't take themselves seriously.
Yes,
you know,
exactly.
People don't think their position in the universe and what they are. But the thing is, you know, not everyone is equipped to think with the universe in a complex way. And you know, someday we're going to be just backward monkeys in a million years' time. There's nothing wrong.
I tend to think everyone is a philosopher to some degree. That's just something I've discussed with people a lot. I think everyone's curious. All children are curious about what's on the other side of the hill or what's around the corner. You know, it's like it's just beaten out of us, isn't it?
I mean, yes, I don't know. I query that, but I often use the analogy, and we'll get back to the point about the system in a minute, and you know, the absolutes. But I often use the analogy, you know, I love David Attenborough, who doesn't? But if you watch one of his programs about the turtles hatching on the beach, out of every 1,000 turtles that hatch, one makes the ocean. The rest, 999 out of each 1,000 become disorientated, or the birds pick them off, or the big fish eat them. But one out of every 1,000. But there's millions and millions of turtles hatching. So one out of every 1,000 insures turtles. Nature insures itself. That's my point. That's the principle. Nature insures itself. Now, in that analogy with philosophy, I believe we're all turtles on a beach. Yeah. And only some of us are going to make the meta ocean. Okay, the rest become disorientated. They chase materialism. You know, they get lost in trauma. Bless. I wish they didn't. I wish beauty and philosophy for all beings, but our species is a scattered head, scattered into ideological hats that have no ontological grounding. We're a lost species coming out of monkey. And only recent, if you look at the evolutionary clock, only in the last few seconds have we arrived at complex language and a kind of relatively complex understanding of what the fuck. What the fuck are we? How are we plugged in? That's very, very early. When you look at the whole evolutionary clock of our human development, we're only in the last few minutes actually looking at the house and going, how many rooms are in this house? Okay, we've been going around in shadows in one room for so many millions of years. So we're lost. We're lost as a species. But because of the philosophical mindsets, individuals who wake up, who ask questions, who don't stop yapping, what are we? We're driven that way. We love it. We're plugged in and we're blessed. I feel it's a sacred blessing to be one of the philosophical minds that go, to ask the questions and gets to gratitude for how complex and beautiful and brilliant it is. The fact that we're trying is magnificent. So I believe we're going to, in the idealist sense that we will all evolve onto the correct structure. As we know, we didn't have alphabets one time, we were in a primal state. We're still in a primal state. We're not long off the trees, like I keep saying. So we have a long way to go yet to ground what language is, to ground how we use language, to ground what we are. Even if we're not a set of systemic modes, we have to systemize our position into understanding what we are so we can identify with it. So we're back to that. So it adds up. So we can combine with the correct configuration in the correct manner, it adds up. You see, so we have the modes that are fit for purpose. So we can say we're on a journey out of the dark, developing into language sets, into mindset to make it more refined. We have a long way to go. And thankfully, some of the turtles are making the ocean. But we're barely into the ocean. We get into the ocean, we're going like, my God, the ocean is deep.
That's not the end of the journey. It's like when you hit level 80 on World of Warcraft, that's when the game begins,
Yes, that's right. So we are on that journey, and we have to, that seems to be the case. We're on that journey, and I don't believe, ideally it'd be nice if everybody was philosophically awake, but they're not. That doesn't mean humans don't have the same value, okay? Every single sovereign being has the same value as everybody else, and we're all part of one big legacy. Actually, and just to digress with our legacy, some people believe they can stand back from our legacy and have all the cake, and it shows an arrogance of our species. That's a real arrogance. Where if I put out a product right now and it sells 100 million, whatever gadgets. That's only possible because of the alphabet, because of engineers, because of road builders, because of everything. People who bake dinners for the road builders. It's all one part of people who died in trenches. This is our legacy. The idea, even legacy tells us how connected we are. The legacy that gave us the alphabet, that gave us complex language, gave us concepts like concept and complexity, as I said earlier. We're part of that. And the idea, there's such an arrogance that we can stand back from that. And I'm a billionaire, I can have all the cake.
This reminds me of something that perturbs me quite a lot because I walk a lot in the hills and forest, right? And you come across a beautiful copse or something, and there's a freaking fence there, right? And there's someone's literally just put a fence up in the middle of this wilderness and said, "This is mine. You can't." This is mine. and I think, speaking to exactly what you've just said there, this idea that how can some individual just suddenly turn up? They were just randomly born into this particular community, stick a hole in the ground, say that's mine. It's completely illogical, isn't it?
It's forgetting our legacy. We have to connect to our legacy to know where we are and to know how important we are and to know how wealthy we are.
And if we pursue that and realize what you're saying, which is actually, no, we're mental beings and we need to map that territory, we need to look inward to be able to evolve to the next stage. We're not going to be so connected to these chunks of physical matter out there, are we? We're not going to want to build piles of bricks to prove that we're a man. We'll be pursuing more esoteric concerns. And so this idea of growth and possession and GDP and all this fucking bullshit, frankly. It feels like a curse. At the moment, the game that we've manufactured for ourselves on this godforsaken planet, it feels like we've totally fucked it up. Because we have to, ordinary folk are just saying, we can't change. The violent ape hypothesis is true. We're just nasty pieces of work. Look at all these wars throughout history. That proves it. We've proven that socialism can't work. So that and that's just in the bin now. That's a dirty word. It's just, we've really fucked up. For me, the only response to that is precisely what we're doing here, is to try and think about this stuff, think about what being human means, try and get a grip on it, and try and just behave ourselves a bit better. Really take responsibility for our role here as we might be the only sapient being that's ever appeared on this planet, for all we know.
That's right, or even in the universe.
Or even in the universe, we don't know that we're not. It's pretty unlikely. And, I suspect you'd agree that the chances are there's probably beings that are further on down the path than we are. Yes. That brings me to a question. So that is a possible thing in your mind. It is possible to peel back more layers about the true ontological status of the cosmos. So we can know more. And that just gets my head aflame thinking about what these aliens might know and what they might be able to do and things like that. Have you got any thoughts on that, or is that just too wildly speculative?
Look, if there's aliens, we'll have to assume they went through an evolutionary development too. You know,
Mm.
like if aliens visited us in the morning, well, straight away the journey is part of their mindset. You know, to acquire knowledge, to experience the other, to search, to seek out. You know, okay, they've evolved. They didn't just appear in a magic vacuum. You know, it wouldn't be a magic fairy god story. Evolution would be part of their journey too. So they'd have concepts for it. And if they were scientific, if they were here to explore, you know, we could make a lot of assumptions. But anyway, just to get back to us, you know, back to a point about you know, where we are, you know, on the evolutionary ladder. You know, it speaks to a monkey head trying to develop where we are outside. If you look outside the window right now, war and, you know, corruption and lies. But our species is a phenomenal species. There's way more good than bad. You know, you have a party of 1,000 people and 998 people behave themselves, but 2 people start a violent fight and stick knives in each other. That can overshadow the whole party and get this idea, oh my God, everything is violent, but it's not. We are, you know,
no news is good news. Yeah.
No news, but we are a beautiful species. We forget that. We're polluted with shadows, but we forget the good. We're a great species. Given our evolution, given the darkness we've come out of, we're actually a phenomenal species. Okay. Yeah. And we are rising. I truly believe we're rising. But just to go back to, you know, even, you know, how do we change it? We don't have to just change it through becoming more complex and understanding our ontological grounding. That's part of our journey to understand the true nature of our species and nature of the universe. That's part of that journey. But just on, you know, on this day, I mean, even the heuristics that carry our idea of wealth, you know, the materialist world, that I have a mansion, I have a chandelier, I have 500 suits and a Rolex watch, you know, these things are impoverish us. These are, like I said, the esoteric is where we need to go, into the transcendental garden, into the spiritual garden. That's what gives us true wealth. So we need to recondition our young people. We need to recondition them about what wealth is. You know, the wealth of understanding, the wealth of gratitude, the wealth of
community.
Community, the sacred apple, holding sacred by one another. And the idea, like, I need a 50 bedroom mansion to measure me. That's a little boy's dream. I'll forgive a 14-year-old boy for wanting 50 bedrooms and 50 Ferraris, but that's a little boy's dream. When we grow up, you know, a teepee is fine. You know, my wealth is, my chandelier is the moon. My chandelier is the moon and the sun and Jupiter. That's my chandelier. That's my garden. That's the centerpiece of my garden. Okay, that's wealth, and that's a different conditioning. Okay, we don't need to go into deep metaphysical thought to recondition ourselves around, you know, a broader, brighter way of thinking. So, you know, sorry, I just
no, that's beautiful. I love that. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
But
then back to the deeper thing again. Like I said, just to go back with the absolutes, I can't know absolutes. I can't know the modes are absolute. Okay, we might evolve out of them, but I know in a million years' time we'll be adding things up. You know, we'll be looking for precision in things. The modes are fit for purpose. They, you know, if there is a God and God is developing, God will need to be able to add itself up. God, to know itself, God would need to be able to categorize itself. God would need to be able to combine with its own set configuration to square itself up. I believe it has the tools to do so. These are God-sized tools. We can add up all of evolution. We can add up where the future might take us. You know what I mean? Like, we're looking for precision. We're looking to combine with the correct configuration, to categorize things, to identify with things, to unify. This great mode, unification. 1 + 1 = 2, unified. We're trying to unify with what we are so we can identify it and lock down. Okay, we're trying to combine with the correct configuration. To me, these are all the tools. These are all the tools that allow us to see. These are all the tools that allow a God, a conscious, awareness to rise and know itself, to know thyself. You said know thyself from the logo, to know thyself. Well, you know, what is it to know thyself? Because we can't know a human. It's actually human that's ineffable, not God. Okay, so I believe you know what I mean? Like, we're always trying to. People often say God is ineffable, or, you know, but we've never you know, grounded man or woman. We're not able to. Man and woman are ineffable. The system knows this. The system can't. When it abstracts man is gone from the lens. Okay, so it's man that's in. Man is no grounding. It's the system that knows this. I believe the modes are fit for purpose. They're necessitated truths. Yeah, to find, to align, and synthesize with its own framework. That seems to be the only thing in play for me. Now, out here, it needs to engage with this reality and understand its chemistry and biological composition so it can better understand them and help itself live and thrive in a better way. And, you know, just to understand the puzzle. It's fantastic. But the inward journey is where the eye is. There's no journey out here, like I said. It seems to be we've been evolving. We're talking ourselves inward. Our language is talking ourselves in. We're trying to talk ourselves into the ontological core of being. We're talking ourselves inwards.
You could probably prove that by some statistical analysis of term usage on the internet or something, couldn't you? You know.
How do you mean?
Well, I was just thinking, you're saying if our language is changing to reflect that inward journey, then you might find more words like introspection or spirit or...
Yes. Yeah.
You might just see more of those terms occurring in Google searches and things like that, you know.
Dimension, meditation, to move towards the core.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. True. And
Yeah,
so
because
how
like I said, we can't find ourselves out here. We can understand the make of the compositional variables of out here, but we can't find ourselves. Where is out here to find ourselves? If there's no disconnect, where are you going to find yourself?
Yeah, because we've convinced ourselves that we've kind of emerged from within this, I don't know, space-time manifold, right, or something.
That's right.
And this world is responsible for our production. So if we understand more about this, or more mechanically about this space-time realm, we can then explain how we emerged and so on, and have a better understanding of what we are and so on. But yeah, it's like I say, it's hit a brick wall, hasn't it? So reductionist materialism just can't really go anything. You mentioned the Planck constant. You know, space-time is meaningless, but beneath that, and time is meaningless, but beneath this.
Are we seeing is it a hallucination, a simulation?
Not the Planck constant, the Planck length, and the Planck time length as well. That's what I meant. Sorry, but yeah, sorry, go on.
So yeah, look, are we hallucinating reality the way we see it? Is it a simulation? Who knows? The point is, the system is fit for purpose for finding those answers. There's holes in all the fields, no matter how complex the fields are, but the system is the thing that understands there's holes in it. And it's fit for purpose. It can keep adding it up. It's a puzzle. Say it's a Rubik's Cube, the whole system we're looking at. Well, and we haven't turned all the squares, and they're not all aligned yet, but we know that. But we can keep turning them, we can keep adding them up, we can keep trying to combine with the correct configuration. So we are fit for purpose. So I believe it's a system we need to be refining. That's the headset. The headset that wears everything is what we need to refine. We do not know the compass of self. We do not, Kant was about this, but I use it through the metaphor of compass. We do not know the north, south, east, and west of self. We do not know how we're sailing forward. Where are we sailing to? And it's an inward journey. It has to be. There is nowhere else to go. There is nowhere else to go. And I do believe it's spirit too, because the atheists think it's just the materialist world, there's no spirit, there's no conscious framework in the way we feel it in a spiritual sense. Well, in that case, we're meat. We're meat. And if we're meat, then nothing has any meaning. Music means nothing. This conversation means nothing. It's just two apes waxing lyrical for the sake of. There's no meaning behind it. And the idea, spirit is in everything. The spirit to know science, the spirit to know chemistry, the spirit to go down the rabbit hole. Spirit drives it all. Okay, the spirit to systemize it all and synthesize with it all, the spirit to move beyond the body and farming and hunting and medicine, the spirit to know the metaphysical core. Why are we monkeys equipped with that question? Why do we know to ask that question? Why have we concepts like epistemology and phenomenology and ontology? Why are we monkeys mapping fields in that way? Okay, we're evolving into it. Okay, and all of this phenomenology, ontology take us inwards. It's an inward journey.
That's really interesting. It's the idea that the fact that we have an ape that can describe itself as a deterministic mechanism is evidence to suggest that it isn't.
There's evidence to suggest that it isn't. Exactly that. And we understand
the fact that it's even reflecting and asking those questions of itself.
Why did we evolve with that? Why did we evolve to think like that? I mean, surely it was enough that we evolved to fit the environment, that we could hunt and have, procreate and sit around and have relative conversations about the fire in the sky. And we have evolved. We've evolved. We're transcending that. It's always been in us. We have no say in that. You and I arrived on the evolutionary ladder in the last few decades, and here we are, two fish at the end of a long journey, wearing a different form, asking complex questions, trying to systemize our position in the universe. Okay? That speaks volumes about our species. I love us for that.
And it speaks volumes about the very nature of life itself. That because the fact that we're here suggests that the potential for our emergence was there. And and it's this problem of abiogenesis, I think, is a bit of a misnomer. I mean, I mentioned this to Dennis Noble the other day. I think that if you're going to do an evolutionary theory, you have to account for all of the materials involved in it. And we're now saying that there's stuff that's inanimate, right? So that we've got this inanimate, clunky, deterministic matter that just simply cannot produce consciousness, right?
It cannot produce consciousness.
So this has a huge bearing on our self-image, and then consequently what we're actually capable of doing with our time on this earth. So this is really,
I like the concept abiogenesis. I like that concept to describe that. I don't know that work. All I know is the system that systemizes all fields.
Abiogenesis. So the problem of kind of how did life emerge? And for me,
where's the genesis of it?
But there is no inanimate substrate from which it emerged. That's my point. How can it? Well, I mean, I don't know. This is metaphysics, isn't it? And Kant and Spinoza and people talk about this, but getting a kind of immaterial substance from a material substance just seems flatly illogical, doesn't it?
Yes, and it doesn't systemize that way. It doesn't abstract that way. Okay, so we're back. It doesn't. It's
interesting.
if the brain says, if the system is part of, if the brain consciousness is epiphenomenal, just say we talk about emergence. You mentioned emergence. Well, if it's emergent in the brain, we still systemize. We have a set of modes that work in conjunction with one another. So I'd like to know how that system emerged. So when we talk about emergence, we have to ask what has actually emerged. So we have the phenomenon and the mind, but the system, a system has emerged. To debunk the system, you'd have to engage the system. To debunk the system, you'd have to add the system up. You'd have to find precision with what was being said. You'd have to categorize it and combine with its configuration to debunk it. So you have to engage the system. It's tautological, if you will. It's wrapped into itself. Okay. So we have to engage. So we can say, with some kind of absolutism, that the system has emerged. A system has emerged in the body, in the ocean, the physical ocean, if you will, dissipating ocean. Everything is dissipating as we speak. But a systemic I has emerged in that. And it seems to be in a brain that's dissipating the entire body from the brain outwards. Seems to be dissipating. Now it's asking itself, does it begin at Planck's constant? What does that mean dimensionally? Fuck knows is the answer to that. No one knows. Let's not even pretend we're in the ballpark of understanding that, okay? We really are, but we're at that wall now. And that's a phenomenal place to be for a monkey, okay? So we are a systemic lens trying to systemize things, and we realize there's holes in everything, very complex holes to be filled in. Okay, that sits us on the chessboard in a very systemic, intelligent way. So once again, I'm all about the system. What we need to refine the system to engage, to lock the phenomenological nut down, to lock the phenomenological spanner into the ontological nut. That's what I'm essentially about. Line up the correct modes of the mind, the systemic I, and hopefully over eons, as we develop it further, it'll lock us into our ontology. And once we maybe lock in at the Planck's constant, who knows? We might be able to travel in a new realm from there. We don't know.
What is there an end goal, or is that like an answer? Is that a human kind of a typical human ask? Isn't it? It's like, oh, what's the end? Is that a mammalian kind of reasoning, or is there some kind of overarching purpose to this? And is it to do with that self? You used a particular sort of self-unification. It's like the system getting to the point where it completely understands itself. And is there a Godelian limit on that as well?
The question is like, what is the limit? What is the goal? Is not a human question to me. It's a spiritual question.
Right. Okay.
Again, the human is the domain of let's play football and listen to a bit of music and let's go out and listen to a jazz band and and so on. Let's get laid and smoke some drugs and do what we do. Enjoy this realm the best we can and hold sacred by it. But the bigger question is, once we start asking, what are we? We're in a spiritual domain. This is and my new book's called Man Has No Voice. There is only spirit. So spirit's asking the question. Spirit's asking the journey. Why do I have a systemic modes built in? Why, how far down the rabbit hole do I go? Where do I begin? Where am I going?
I'm actually with you on this, Jaap. I mean, intuitively, this sounds spot on to me, and logically as well, I think. But at the same time, the counter could be, well, actually, some of what we're doing now is just an extension of the problem-solving capability of mammals, right? So, mammals are, really, really good at kind of like taking in multiple bits of information and forming a position, developing a self-model. Where am I? What's threatening me? What, am I hungry? All this kind of stuff. And so you could say that some of this metaphysical speculation is some kind of extension of that. But it's just about stuff that's been generated by our own minds rather than stuff that's in this. This is the kind of challenge I face when I try and persuade people that consciousness is fundamental and kind of this kind of stuff you're talking about. So what do you say to that? I mean, Dawkins might just say, no, there's a God spot in the brain, and that's why you have religious, spiritual experiences, because it helps the mammal survive and give it purpose. What do you say to that?
Well, even if it's in a case, okay, all these tools, all these modes are an extension. The philosophy is just an extension, a byproduct almost of being able to engage with the environment. Well, Kant understood there's a priori empirical and a priori pure. Okay, we have the mind and the way the mind is structured, the way it's prescribed to be, and then the way it engages with the empirical realm. Now, I believe consciousness is prior, so consciousness had to rise up out of the dark. It is stuck in the environment, in the body conduit. That's my premise. Okay, we're stuck in the body conduit.
But we are stuck. Right.
We're stuck because we're evolving. Okay, we're stuck in the dark. We didn't have the language to talk about ourselves. Stuck in that sense. Okay, we didn't have the language, the mindset to engage with reality in a relatively complex manner. So we've had to survive. Consciousness had to survive in the body, and the body got disconnected from consciousness along the way and became man and woman trying to take the mountain. Okay, the House of Babel, all that, we got disconnected. Long stories, but you know yourself. Right. So anyway, we got to this, but we have tools. Without all the modes are the reason we survive in this environment. First of all, we need to add up how we're going to hunt the buffalo. We need to bring it down. We need to combine with the correct configuration. We need to categorize buffalo from water so we can hunt the right thing with precision. Or, we can identify the buffalo. We unify as a tribe how we're going to bring down the buffalo. So all the modes are engaged to talk about our environment.
You've got to get a tissue. Yeah, carry on. I'm getting a tissue. Sorry, man. Sorry, mate.
That's okay. So yes, so we can say that all our the systemic modes are engaged with the environment to help us thrive, in the environment. And all the modes are the modes we're using to systemize all our places in the environment, whether it's hunting, whether it's chatting about music, whether it's creating music, combining with the correct configurations. And it's the same set that go in after chemistry and going after biology. So, even if they are an extension of, the lived experience with the environment, even if these modes, if you like, philosophy is just a byproduct of it. Here we are with that byproduct, trying to understand our ontological realm, trying to understand the depth of self. Like these modes have taken us beyond. Now, these modes that were fit for purpose to thrive in the environment have taken us into the abstract lens where we realize this thing that's thriving has no body unto itself. It's a part of a process, okay? And so we're fit for purpose when it comes to understanding the universe. And that speaks volumes. That begs the question, why? Why are we fit? Einstein said, it's incomprehensible that the universe is comprehensible to us. Okay, it's comprehend the universe. So we have to ask the question. I'm not going to take the Dawkins view. Then, what do we just ignore these modes because that's all they're for? Is just engaging with the environment? That's ludicrous. Okay, he uses the modes. He systemizes these fields. That's how he come to know. So what's this system that allows us to come to know? Why are we monkeys? Like I said, asking questions of consciousness, the hard problem of consciousness, the binding problem. Why are we monkeys? Why? I mean, if that's just a byproduct, well, then bring on the fucking byproduct. you know what I mean? Like it's phenomenal. And so I believe I just think it's ludicrous to think that, it's just an extension of being able to hunt and chat about our environment. No way, we're structured. We're structured geometrically to fit the universe symmetrically. We really are. So, I have to believe that's part of the journey. I have to believe there were fish with an alphabet and relative understanding of abstraction. Now that we're to abstract the fact that we were fish and we went on an evolutionary journey, and here we are. There's something about why does our species need to know that? You know what I mean? Why? That's not just a byproduct of the fact that we could hunt. Why can we extend and transcend and know that? And why are we so humble in the face of it all that we're not losing our heads here, going, "Oh my God, we don't even know what the body is. We don't even know how many dimensions we're active." We're excited by that.
Yeah. How do people live with? This is one of the reasons why people are quite turned off by philosophy, I think, and why it feels like such a battle to even engage people about philosophical subjects sometimes. I mean, maybe I just hang out with the wrong people, but people are scared of it because actually they don't like the fact that they're on a rock in space hurtling at 35,000 miles an hour, and it's freaky stuff. Because and you might think actually a kind of an ape on a rock in space shouldn't really be designed to be able to manage all of these cosmic questions, but as you say, we clearly are.
Yes.
Like
I said, only some of us are. Our species is waking up, and it's a big wave. We're on a 7 million year wave out of chimp. You know what I mean? Like, and on that wave is Kant and Socrates and Aristotle and Whitehead. All of them are on that one wave, crashing down, and another wave will come up out of it.
Yeah, but what I like about what you've done here is you've kind of turned things on their head. You've actually said, well, no, because the real thing that we are is the thing doing all this philosophical speculation and learning and growing and engaging, right, cosmically. So that's the real thing. So the post boxes and the houses and the computers and all that stuff, that's the concrete things. They're the ephemeral things. They're just part of the experience. And that's the opposite of how people normally view things. They think that, it's grounded to sort of feel like you've got your feet on the ground, set aside all that fairy story nonsense and just focus on getting a job and all this kind of stuff. So it's just really refreshing to hear someone say, actually, no. The speculation, the philosophizing, the metaphysics, that's the real stuff.
And the concept like God is in the details. Okay, are made in the image of God. Well, God is in the details. So what are the details? And like I said, when you detail the body, you can't detail it. It loses itself down a hole. Where are the details? You can't reference it. The inference loses itself down the rabbit hole. So, God is in the details. Well, so I'm detailing the modes. I'm detailing a systemizing eye that details everything, if you will. God is in the details. The mode of adding can add up the entire tracks of evolution. There's something powerful about that mode. You know what I mean? Some people think, well, I'm the muscles and I'm my fast car. I said, well, I'm the mode of adding. There's a high measure of me. You know, I can add things up. That's a phenomenal measure. That's how to flex. You know what I mean? I categorize things. There's my flex. You know, I unify things. There's my flex. You know, the flex, the muscle. It's all about flex nowadays, isn't it? In the cool way. Flex. You know, the flex. Okay, so what God is in the details and made in the image of God. So I often think God is a conscious I, not as some being with a magic wand. Okay, God is consciousness. Call it what you will. You know, but you know, made in the image of God. Well, if we go back to the sort of paradigm, the old paradigm to me story that God is a magic man, something separate than us with a magic wand up in heaven waiting for us all. Okay. Well, if we're made in the image of that God, then God has a penis, God has eyes, God has ears, God has a mouth to go, hello, Matt, and yeah, welcome to heaven. You know, that's God, you know, because we're made in that image. But the body doesn't, the body doesn't hold, like I said, we can't premise the body. So are we made, the modes are within all of us, the systemic modes, and the modes are the image of God. In that sense, we are made in the image of God. God is in the details. Okay. God, the conscious systemic I. The conscious systemic I to me is God, because, and what I mean by that is there is no human in the abstract lens. Therefore, the thing that remains is a God in comparison to that, in contrast to two.
This is really, there's a parallel here between what you're saying and what Susan Blackmore was talking about, because, you know, the hard problem of consciousness, and, you know, Thomas Nagel, what is it like to be a bat, right?
Yeah.
And she sort of said a similar thing conceptually. She said, look, there is nothing that it's like to be a bat, because a bat is a physical object, right? She said, but there is something that it's like to be the model of the bat. And that seems to just hint at some of what you're talking about, because you seem to be talking about, when you talk about the system, that seems to be about models and maths.
Yeah.
Is that fair? So is your language, is the language for approaching this stuff, is it fundamentally mathematical?
It's geometrical, if you like. It's geometric. We look at, we systemize. All I know is we systemize and we synthesize, and we systemize in beds of inferences. Okay, so there's something mathematical about that. It's systemic. We lock down. Our entire conversation has been moving along structured inferences. Okay, we infer consciousness, we infer monarchy, we infer corruption, we infer greed, we reference the inference. So we're moving. So we take away the phonetic sound of every language. What we're doing is systemizing inferences at an intuitive level. We intuit inferences, patterned inferences, iterations of inferences, sequential iterations, and we're looking at evolution along sequential iterations which are inferential. So when mind locks on to inferential shapes, same with mathematics, 1 + 1 = 2, we model inferential shapes, okay? Model certain geometrical sets. So it's all geometrical to find the symmetry of things. It's all, so you see the way it's systemic, sight is internal, and it's internal along structured inferences. Okay, that is how we're seeing, and mathematical models are built in the back of that, and so is language. Language moves along structured inferences. I'm moving along sets of inferences right now. I'm referencing the inferences. I'm coordinating your mind along sets of inferences so you can concur. So we're both trying to system, we're trying to square things up. This is what's going on at the innate level of intuition. The intuition is not just something we intuit in the environment, we intuit along structured inferences is how we see. We can close our eyes and switch off these eyes. You know, when we abstract the eyes in our heads, they filter light, if you will, in fractals, you know what I mean? Like, but the eye is the inner eye that sees that, it maps that, it structures itself along the inferential connections. Okay. When we're trying to map a cell, we're looking for the inferential. Everything we understand within is inferential. Yeah. So we see mathematics is just mapping more complex combinations of those inferences. That's all mathematics does. It maps, it models sets of inferences and maps onto them, combines with the combination. But there's holes in all of it, okay? Because we're mapping out here and mapping out here. So, you know, there is no sense of the bat. There is no, to me, there's only the system trying to wake up. We're asking questions that are outside of us at the moment. We need the headset to know what we are. We're asking questions that we can't grasp because we don't even know what we are. You know what I mean? Like the atheist is writing off God when the atheist can't even ground man. Go figure. You see what I mean? Yeah, so until we ground what we are phenomenologically, and you know, it's like an epistemological ontology. Until we ground what we are and how we're plugged in, everything else is guesswork with holes in it.
So is your approach an attempt to do just that then, to try to ground this?
Yes, to ground it. In my new book, Man Has No Voice, I've grounded all the modes and show how they fit into reality and how they fit into their own set and what it says about the implications for it, what it says about our species. You know, there's no flag in my way of thinking. There's no flag in the system. whether you're Russian or Irish, black or white, male or female, we all systemize. And the system is dormant in most people. But everyone uses adding. They add up their pennies, they add up their family members, they add up their way to the airport, they categorize the airport. They're using all the modes unbeknownst to them. People are engaging all day long, every day with the modes. Driving a train.
We're all kind of essentially doing the same thing, but just with different sorts of aesthetics wrapped around it.
Yes, exactly that. But so we're all doing this, but we have the fundamental, what are we? When we ask what we are, we have to peel away the outside, the noise, what we do, what we engage with. My hand is here, my hand picks things up. This has dexterity, it can write, it can use certain objects, but that doesn't tell me what the hand is. So to ask what the hand is, we have to forget what it does and ask, how does it function as a hand? How is it connected to the whole neurology of mind and brain and so on? So we have bigger questions to understand the hand. So when we have to disengage from ego to understand what man is. We abstract, and when we're abstracting, we have to forget what Russian is or Irish is or male is. We're abstracting so we can understand our nature. Okay, and once we start that, that's how we understand ourselves. We disengage from the environmental table and we move into the house of self. We move inwards. And so the more we keep abstracting, man disappears from the lens. We just keep abstracting. Okay, and that's the same tool that allows us to engage with reality through mathematics. It allows us to engage through science. But when we disengage, we're always back in the field of the metaphysical pond, if you will. And and all I know to see and there is we use a set of modes, and the modes engage through ego and they systemize out here. But when I disengaged, I'm left in the bed of modes. And if you think about them as a constellation set unto themselves, as a kind of concatenation of modes, if you bring them all together as a set, an eidetic set, okay, and it kind of gives a skeleton agency to the eye, to the mind, the way it intuitively sees systemically. I want to refine and know that. I believe that's the next phase. That's where we have to go.
Yeah, there's obviously something extremely unifying about this, because
it's unifying. It unifies the head.
You're pointing at that sort of you're pointing at habits that we all share, right? So there's something that we could all relate to this. So if we gave it the time, look at it and say, yeah, that's something I do, right?
Yes.
So we can say, well, that's encouraging, isn't it? Because the way things are at the moment, it feels like we feel very separate from each other, and traditions and customs they seem very distinct. You zoom out and go a million miles up in the sky and look down, and we all look like one big happy family. But but
the most beautiful part of that family too, just if you put a lens in it, we ponder the universe, and we're in awe of the universe and the planets and what we can see now through the Hubble telescope and so on, and and what we're starting to understand about the body and the cell, and people tune in by degree to certain scientific programs, and it's absolutely phenomenal. And the cell is phenomenal. It's its own flower. But if we look, the most beautiful flower in the universe is the human mind, the brain. The human mind is such a beautiful flower. Okay, it's the flower that is blossoming to think with all the other flowers. It wants to enter the apple and know the apple. That's the way it flowers. That's the way it blossoms. If you think about it as a flower. So looking out into space is its own flower. And so the human flower to me is like, wow, it has such complexity. It's this thing waking up in the human brain, and it just keeps abstracting, and there's something in blossom of that. Okay, that's the ultimate blossom in the universe. That on a planet, in this vast void, whether there's other life out there or not, I'm sure there is. But right now we do know on this planet, in this house, in this garden, there's a flower starting to blossom in a transcendental spiritual way. Okay. And it's asking complex questions in the universe. I mean, that doesn't arouse people to tune into their, and my point is that's a universal position. That we all have the possibility that Russian, Irish, Japanese, wherever you're from, we're all, like I said, when all humans ask the question of what are we, they're in an abstract state straight away. We can all abstract, whether it's dormant in most people. They're not aware of the fact that they're abstracting all the time. It's their dominant eye. We're abstracting. So what is that?
Yeah, I was just thinking about an author I used to read, Ian M. Banks, actually. He wrote science fiction. And
I know Banks,
and there was this galactic community called the Culture, and every so often particular kind of intelligent species on a planet, they just disappear, right? And it was called going sublime, right? And so it sort of smacks of what you're talking about. It's like they're going on this kind of journey of self-realization and recognition and so on.
Going sublime.
And once they figure everything out, they have no need for physical space anymore, and so they just and nobody knows where they go or anything like that. So
Yeah, who's to say we're not going to go sublime someday in millions of years, and we're going to start to evolving inwards, where our evolution takes on a whole new journey, and we start to evolve and we let go of the body. Who knows? We don't know. We just don't know.
I mean, look at where science is going now. I mean, there's 2 or 3 universities in Britain now doing psychedelics research.
That's right.
You come across. I mean, they're putting these people on extended DMT trips.
That's right.
And there's whole groups of people reporting similar phenomena. It's almost as though these realms are mappable, and reporting encounters with similar entities and stuff. I mean, there could be something in the wiring of the mammalian brain that expects to see certain kinds of agential forms. And, when we talked about, we're not long out of the trees with snakes and big cats threat, so this might explain why people see serpentine creatures and things like that. The point, just briefly, the point I'm making is that we do seem to be doing what you're suggesting. We're going on. You've got people with lab coats on with meditators, and you've got people talking about religious experiences with psychologists, and so we do seem to be going through a kind of an awakening. I mean, maybe I'm an optimist, but for me, it does feel like the eye of the world is slowly reopening, if you like.
We're starting to emerge. We've emerged in our garden. That doesn't mean we've emerged with it. You know what I mean? Like, we have emerged. Here we are, monkeys we've emerged in a garden, but we're not fully emerged with it yet. Okay.
Perhaps but what about the collective human mind, though? Sort of, think people like Carl Jung, perhaps. The idea of sort of ants in an ant colony, each one individual having no idea really of its role within the broader telos of that ant's nest, if you like.
Yes.
Perhaps similarly, the human collective is doing something. Perhaps there's a singular intelligence you could point to with humans and say, well, they're clearly trying to do something en masse.
Well, we are. To me, the singular intelligence is the system. Because it's the system that allows for everything. The system is what goes down the rabbit hole, whether it's through hallucinations, into chemistry, into every field you think of, history, everything. Evolution is the history, is the lens, there's this systemic mind that goes down and abstracts it and tries to systemize it. That's the one constant. If we go down certain rabbit holes right now on this day, like say into hallucinogenics, and we find out, say, in 100 years' time that there was kind of a dead end, there was nowhere else to go. Okay, it's the system that will know that. The system is the thing that's constant. The system is the thing that is looking at the sublime, trying to wake. It's always the system for me. It's always the system. It doesn't matter whatever avenue we go down. Say we go down 1,000 avenues. We're going down 1,000 avenues today, and say 550 of them hit a dead end in 50 years' time. Okay, it's the system that will discern that. Okay, discernment is another mode. We can discern. We're discerning beings. We're very discerning. The fact that we have to chase certain avenues that lead nowhere is part of the journey, because we're coming up in the dark. We have to always remember that we are, like, one thing about the analogy there you use of the ants. One thing separate. There's many things separate about our species in relation to every other species. We're carrying a transcendental cross. Ants haven't woken up and started to ask questions about their own identity and their own individuality and place in the sovereign place in the colony, and what's their ontological framework. And and as soon as ants wake up to that, their hive will break and scatter into mad ideologies with measure hats, because the journey is one through emotion, through trauma, through psychology, through psychopathy, through all the different variables of life. In a Jungian sense, we're attached to all of that. It's embedded in us. Okay, all the archetypes, it's all embedded in us. We're wearing a heavy evolution. But we're the only species that split from stasis. We're the only species. Spiders haven't started asking questions about spiders. Crocodiles don't ask about crocodiles. We're the only species with an alphabet, with abstraction. Because we're the only species that have written on cave walls. We are the conduit. See, one road to lead. You only need one road to get to Rome, and nature, the conscious eye, only needed one conduit to rise. And when it found that conduit after millions of years of morphing, it moved through the chimp up into its next phase. I truly believe that seems to be the case. That's the case. It moved because here we are on this day. We're the only species that understands complexity and asking questions of every animal. We ask questions of everything. We ask questions of the universe. We're the only species. So, we are not a finished product yet. If we had stayed at the earliest realm as chimp, then we're a finished product. We fit into our environment. We procreate. We eat. We shit. We die. We move. It keeps, producing itself. And there's nothing. It dies out. It just, the whole teleological line is to just keep procreating and die out someday when this planet burns up. But we're clearly more than that. We're a species that has split. We're a species that has stood back from ourselves and started to ask questions of ourselves. And the second you go into that realm, you go down blind avenues. And if you attach that to an emotional field that you can't stabilize, then you're in trouble, and you will end up in genocides and mad class systems and so on. Anyway, We can go into all of that. Doesn't really matter. We're a species that has split. And there is something in that. It begs a question: why? Why are we to speak? And I believe consciousness needs one conduit. I think about it like that, to pass through and to rise into its own nature. And along the way, these are evolutionary blips. Genocide, it's an evolutionary blip. Blessed to all the wars on the planet today and 1,000 years ago, but they're all evolutionary blips. It's a monkey trying to stabilize its line. And it's lost in half-measure hats with half-measure ideas of the universe, with an emotional field it can't control. And if you mess with it, there's fields of indignation and anger and rage and psychosis, and it'll attack. You know what I mean? There's fields of permutations of love, all the different variables that make us up. It's a very hard mix to hold down, especially when you're standing back and asking questions and you don't have the answers. Okay? You're prone to disaster. It's a recipe for disaster, to move out of the dark through an autism, if you like. It's almost like we're moving through autistic shapes, shift shaping through autistic cognitive knots as we move out of chimp into the complexity of self. Do you see what I mean with the whole track? Yeah. And we're trying to come out the other end of that. And we have to be kind to ourselves and understand. We have to measure ourselves not in relation to Palestine on this day and greed. We have to measure ourselves into relation to the evolutionary mile we're on, understanding the developmental variables involved in that, the different permutations, the permeated permutations that brought us to where we are on this day. There's a whole field traction of inferences that we can measure. Okay. And so we're trying to rise out of, that's what I mean by the dark. We're trying to rise out of the dark. And here we are on this day trying to overcome.
What about morality? Is this bound up with morality? Do we have a duty towards these sorts of inquiries?
Whether, I mean, I don't know. We've a duty, or we've a duty to respect the sovereignty of each and everybody else. There's no doubt about that. And people are lost in ideological hats with senses, with ignorance and arrogance. So they don't always follow the correct structure. Like we said, like we were saying, that evil isn't something permeating us, creeping up from some creepy ghost, monstrous, demonic thing. Evil is just a pathological, problem. It's we lose line with the structure of things. Okay, so. Sorry, what was your question again? I jumped.
Yeah, I was just wondering because
morality. Sorry, yes, morality.
But I was, because it sounds like there's what's the word? Imperative. There sounds like there's an imperative in
the imperative. Yeah. I do believe in imperative. Well, it's imperative that we do right by one another. I want to live my life, and I want my family and loved ones to live and thrive in this realm. And I don't want to be exploited. And I know you don't want to be exploited, and you don't want your loved ones to be exploited. So we can apply that to all beings. That's part of being sovereign. I don't want to be exploited. I don't want someone to walk up and give me a punch in the nose because they knocked the function of my nose out of play. They oppress my nose, so to speak, okay? It functions a certain way, so please don't come up and punch me in the nose, because it creates a dysfunctionality for me, breathing and pain and so on. And it throws me out of my environment, potentially for days or weeks and so on, traumatizes me. So in that sense, there's a moral compass. Do right by one another, okay? Now, obviously, there's ideological hats that they spin us out of, they knock it out. Their ideological hats of half measures knock us out of balance with one another. And there's been myriad problems on our planet that we have to overcome because we're knocked out of alignment with the true nature of being. Okay. And like I said, it's evolutionary blips. We'll evolve out of this. It's a process. But morality is literally, I believe, just holding, in alignment with one another, to do right by one another. And there's a morality, at least in trying to understand one another. Okay, I might not believe in all the way your moral compass is lined up, but there's a morality and understanding that I won't attack you over that. Yeah, I'm happy to debate you over that. There's morality in that, more complex morality, that we have differences, say ideological differences. And it's one thing to understand the core of self where we're identical, and but if we want to just debate how we live amongst one another, okay, we might have differences, but we have the ability to systemize those differences and arrive at a conclusion that's best for all of us. That's beautiful. There's a morality in that. So I think we make too much of it. I think we polluted morality and ethics too much, and we've lost sight of the line we're on. Okay, I don't think it's a really complex subject to do right by one another.
Yeah, because obviously, let's say we form a community around some of these ideas, and it grows, and there's some demonstrable progress. People are happier and more aligned with the system, as you talk. And let's say another group turns up and says, "We're going to blow you up."
Yes.
So presumably, that in order to continue pursuing that alignment with the system and so on and so forth, it would fall to us to defend ourselves, right?
Yes.
And this just points to, again, there's another author have you come across Olaf Stapledon?
No.
He's a British philosopher, early 1900s, and he was a conscientious objector, but he went to World War I as an ambulance driver.
Yes.
But he wrote a couple of books. There's one called Star Maker, one called First and Last Men, and he talks about stuff like this journey of the awakening of consciousness, and eventually he goes on a journey. He has an argument with his wife, and he goes and stands on a hill and just disappears off into space. It's like he goes on an astral journey, and
Yeah.
freaks the hell out of him. And he ends up getting to the Godhead and all this kind of stuff. But he talks about there's this galactic civilization that had reached this level of enlightenment, and it was under threat. And there was this rogue galactic civilization just going around chewing everything up and destroying everything, kind of World War One sort of territory writ large, you know. And this enlightened one eventually decided, well, no, we're not going to defend ourselves, because we've reached the point where we, you know, of that level of acceptance of their position within a broader cosmic dynamic, that they came up with pacifism was the ultimate virtue. And so they allowed themselves to be destroyed. And I've been puzzling over that ever since, you know.
Yeah.
It's like when you've got a demonstrable, I don't know, medicine or something that could heal everybody and cure cancer or improve everybody's lives, and someone's about to blow it up.
Yeah.
For me, you have to stop them. Right?
I agree. Well, with science fiction, we can create hypothetical potentials, you know, and just for the fun of it. But reality is, you know, I mean, let's look at the war. You know, we're a lovely tribe, and somebody else can come along and attack and kill us all, okay? And they take our territory, because that speaks of the arrogance of territory. They don't understand the territory. The true landscape is our evolutionary legacy. It's the legacy we're of, the embodied legacy. That's our territory. That's our landscape. People are trying to stick flags and fences, like we said, in the woods. They're trying to they think the territory is out here. So that speaks to where we are on the evolutionary ladder for most people. They want you know, why are they chopping each other up so they can have palaces and houses and horse riding and silver plates?
You can see why we're like that, because we're man the hunted, aren't we? We're quite a vulnerable creature. We have to huddle together. So you can see why we've ended up with this kind of territorial neurosis, because we've needed that in the past to get to where we are now.
And here we are in cognitive knots because of it. Okay, so we have to evolve out of it. But the point being is, I understand your sovereignty, and I respect your right as a sovereign being to thrive and live, and, you know, a spiritual being, and, you know, to hold accord by those principles that carry you. And I expect the same for you, from you towards me and everybody else. Now, the fact that somebody comes along and attacks you physically, that's war. Okay, that doesn't change the principle of what is right. Okay, what is right is still right, not to exploit, not to damage, not to hurt, not to oppress. That's what's systemized into us, because that's what lets the body thrive. Nature's not out to fuck itself over. Nature's not out to hurt itself. Nature's not out to punch itself in the face. Okay, this is a species carrying a lens that it doesn't understand yet, and it's lost because it got lost in its evolutionary mile, because we shifted. We started to carry the transcendental cross. It's very complex. We started to ask questions of ourselves. So we're trying to line up the compass, and part of that compass is once we're aligned in the correct manner, there's morality in that. Now, we can see, we were saying earlier on, you know, all the irrational states lead to evil acts. So by definition, rational states don't. Okay, so when ideally we line up the species, once we are aligned, the more aligned you are, you know, the less likely you are to attack somebody. It goes without saying. Okay, so alignment means we won't attack. So it stands to reason. Okay, it's axiomatic that if we align, all the species systemizes and aligns with the correct headset, then we won't damage one another in that sense, because there's no sense in it. There's no sense in attacking. So while we continue to evolve, just to go back to your point about the aliens becoming pacifists and therefore allowing, while I'm a very, very peaceful pacifist, but if someone attacks my son, I'll defend him any way I have to. Because they broke the rule of morality, not me. There's a difference. And I will defend, because the moral stance is the stance that matters. That's the upper hand, okay, the moral stance. So if you attack, so as long as we're on this evolutionary mile and people keep undermining the moral compass, people who are out of sync, we're moral in the fact that we can take somebody who's psychotic and kills 5 people, and we can put them into a cell and say, right, they need help. It's a phenomenal measure of the moral compass. Okay, we realize their environment, their trauma, their past. They might have been abused as a kid. So even though they've inflicted great damage on our species, they broke the ultimate sacred principles, we're still principled enough. The civilized those who see through the civilized lens, are able to stand back and systemize the whole life of that sovereign being and understand, okay, when they were 5, they were physically abused, sexually abused, and as a result, the trauma and so on. So that says something about us in the moral compass, okay? So once again, we're systemizing our way forward. We're trying to come out of this dark evolutionary mile. And on this day, we're still in a very primal state. We're attached to the emotional monkey state. We'll chop you up if you take it's all banana wars. My bananas, I'm taking the territory.
Yeah.
Because we don't understand the true territory.
There seems to be a sort of almost a curse in here somewhere, like at least an irony, in the sense that in order to get to a point of prosperity and community and social organization and stuff, we had to be bloody tough.
Yes.
And robust to be able to
Resilient.
survive.
Yeah.
You know, and so we probably had to fight tooth and nail, you know,
Yes.
to get to this position where we can sit around meditating and thinking about our true origin and so on and so forth. So, you know, that's another sort of little knot, if you like, that needs to be kind of looked at and unraveled. This idea that, you know, it's violence that, well, violence probably helped us get here, didn't it? I mean, I suppose you could also say empathy as well, compassion, working together has enabled our collective action.
It's the tension, between it.
But it's violence against the world. It's violence against the environment. Chopping trees, killing animals, you know, mono harvesting landscapes and things like that. It's to get to the point where we're able to reflect. We've had to do some pretty dastardly deeds, you know. I was just going to ask you mentioned chess a couple of times. Do you play chess?
I did at school. I don't like games. They drive me mad. You know, the adrenaline kicks in and that feeling of having to win just gets in the way of my mind.
Yeah. I must admit, I mean, I'm a gamer. I like games, right?
You like games, yeah.
And I don't know what it's for really. But there's something that's just infinitely fascinating about chess and the complexity and it always seems to provide a really good analogy for philosophical discussion as well.
It does, yeah.
But there's something interesting. My game's improved dramatically in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And part of that was I changed the way I looked at the board. Instead of seeing individual pieces, I saw my pieces as a single animal.
Right.
And it was just like a shift in my kind of.
I get that. It was
So a shift in the way I related to the position. I used to see them as individual pieces in some kind of a, you know, obviously a spatial domain and with properties and so on. But now I see it as a one animal.
Yeah, right.
And
I like that. Yeah,
it's changed everything. It's just totally. I can't really tell you exactly. Tactically what I'm doing differently, but it's just my attitude towards it, and I've gone up 200 rating points.
Yeah, right.
But yeah, so it's clearly ego bound.
Well, when I was younger, I used to enjoy the game of Monopoly, and I always.
Oh my God!
No, but I always cheated, and at the end I said, "Of course I cheated. I'm playing Monopoly."
Yeah. But just the very concept itself is about cheating.
Yeah, the very concept. If you're going to play it, I played it correctly. You know, I said,
"Of course, I'm cheating. I'm charging you to use my hotel." But anyway, so
just to go back to the point you were saying about war and where we are, you know, we're not just, and you know, there's more. It's the tension between things, between empathy. You know, there's many tensions that have shaped us. We're not a story of war and farming. We're a transcendental story. It's really important, I think, we understand ourselves this way. We're a spiritual story, a spiritual giant rising in the body conduit. That's the way I think of our story. And along the way, there's been evolutionary blips and wars and famines and greed and so on. And we're going to rise out of this. There hasn't been a whole lot of war on the planet when you measure the entire evolutionary journey.
Most of our time has been peacetime. Absolutely.
You know, we're multiplying as a species, and we got lost and scattered as a species, and we came back at each other, and we forgot source, we forgot root, and we chopped each other up. We've done a lot of damage, and blessed to it all, you know, blessed to these sacred beings who lost their lives in such a brutal way. But we're not just a story of war. We're a transcendental story. We're a story of literature. We're a story of science. We're a story of spirit. You know, we're a story of love. We're a story of communication. You know, we're a story of song and poetry and art. That's our story. And the tensions between all of those things, the tensions between science and spirit, between art and ignorance, you know, the tension between all of those things have helped us arrive at where we are on this day. Everything I am of, everything I speak is part of a gigantic legacy, a monumental legacy that I hold magnitude with. You know what I mean? I humble myself to it. And it gives me gratitude for being, because without it, we're lost in the dark. Without that great legacy. That's our story. And along that story, one page of it is war. One page of it is immorality. And so on.
But I wonder, you touched on something really interesting there. It's sort of like a dialectic concept. It's the idea. It's some of these struggles that allow us to progress, though, isn't it? It's that distinction between materialism and spiritism, if you like, that enables the conversation and the contrast and the progress. But you know, that progress could be made in separate directions, I suppose. You could go further and further down a materialist tunnel, but I don't.
It is a dialectical journey.
I think the key thing about this is the approach, though, and I think that's what you were touching on earlier. That entering into the conversation is the first step, isn't it? And so recognizing that we don't know what the fuck's going on.
We don't
and
know.
actually there are these what's the word, sort of it's sort of irregularities and things that don't quite fit. And actually, why am I doing that? Why are we doing that? And so just for me, philosophy is the beginning of the beginning of the solution. And
and also it's a recognition of too that we're a philosophical monkey head, and recognizing the beauty in our attempt to try. That says something about it.
Yeah.
I love all people who try.
Yeah,
I love all beings, but I mean philosophically speaking. If you enter the world of philosophy and everything you have to say is incorrect, you're a stunning philosopher for attempting to try. There's something to never, like the other day I left a remark on some metaphysical site and about the modes, and the first response from the guy who asked the question was rude. He came back with, and I just said to him, I'm not going to engage because you're rude.
Oh, was that in Chelsoph? I think it was.
No, it wasn't that.
Oh, right. Okay.
People are polite there, thankfully. But my point is, it's philosophy. It starts with politeness. My point was, I said, I'm not going to engage because your rudeness already tells me how limited you are.
Yeah.
That if you do not understand what you're part of, and if you think that you're the one on the branch that knows, there's an arrogance in that. Okay, you're part of a gigantic legacy, a beautiful, humbling legacy, and all beings who are trying to enter the pond are stunning. All beings who are trying to enter the pond are stunning, and we're all part and parcel and little bits of everything else. Okay, I can't stand back and take credit for the system because Kant is built into me. You know what I mean? And and so on, and David Hume all the way back. So the first thinking shaman, we're part of that.
This I don't know why this has just come to mind, but there was this fantastic documentary about a family of chimps, because we quite often mention apes in this, and we are apes. And there was this colony of them. There was the silverback sort of alpha male. No, they didn't have silver. It was an alpha male anyway, and he had all the girls, and his younger brothers were kind of on his side, but he had one younger brother who was kind of like a bit of a maverick figure. No one really liked him. He used to get beaten up and all this kind of stuff. And one day he just they lived next to this river, and this river sometimes had crocodiles in it, right? And so it was like that was a no-go area. And one day one of his younger brothers just crawled out onto a branch, and the whole chimp family were looking at him like, what the hell's he doing, kind of thing. And he just threw himself in the water. And the moment he did that, his older brother, the alpha male, just wandered off into the forest, and they never saw him again. because this guy had done something. It was an out of context act.
It was outside the box.
It was like, he showed that it was possible to be something other than what you'd been trained to be by your environment, by your expectations, by your social politics, and all this kind of stuff. He showed there's a possibility. We're free. It reminds me of sort of oh God, what was it? Papillon. The guy was imprisoned, but found a strange sort of freedom within his own consciousness. It's 1984. It's Winston, isn't it? It's
that's right.
You can and again, adding more emphasis to the idea that we are mental, spiritual beings, and not
and outside the box, we're the chimp the philosophers are the chimps to climb up in the branch and jump into the pond. And because we do, when we're outside the box, we throw what's in the box up in the air. Throughout history, look at science has questioned, religion, people being burned at stakes over it because we knock people out of their box. Okay.
Do you get pushback because of this? I mean, I get told off for philosophizing with my friends and family. They just say, get out of it. Literally just get out of my room.
I've learned when I was younger, being Yap, I felt like I had to tell everybody how it was. That young egotistical arrogance that I know something, and just always sort of verbally attacking the world when they were wrong. Even when I just didn't have an argument, I would still attack it because I just knew things were innately right or wrong. Okay? But as I got older and I've I'm a much calmer being now. I'm much more in control. I've stabilized the line. I'm much more in control of myself. I respect all human beings, and I go to amazing festivals and sit at fires, and I don't expect people to talk axiom and a priori and presupposition. That doesn't. But when I hear a philosophical mind, or I'm chatting to someone like yourself and their minds are open, I immediately tune into that. That's my favorite frequency. Okay. So one time, like I said, I tried to fill up somebody's head with a lot of philosophical or political ideas. And now I realize, no, they don't want that. They don't want to be in that space. And that's perfectly all right. Who am I to impose on their way of being? People ask questions. I'll always, break it down to them, in relation to their understanding. They don't use words like ontology. Well, I'm not going to go into the word ontology. I'll find a few metaphors to explain the same thing, and relative to how they want to engage with it.
Yeah.
But I'm just glad, I'm grateful. I mean, I'm mainly in isolation. I live here with my son, and I don't really engage with the world a lot. I go to certain festivals because I find it a peaceful environment, but I disengage from the band, from the chaotic circus. I don't like the mask people wear. And so,
that's what persona actually means, mask, doesn't it?
Persona means mask. All right, that's etymology. I didn't know that. Yeah, persona, mask. That's interesting. Mask.
Yeah,
I like that. Yeah.
Well, it's the clues in the name,
Yeah, the clues in the name. Yeah, it's so true. Yeah, clues in the name. But I'm just glad people are philosophical, and we carry the ghosts of philosophers, philosophers who died. We're carrying the long legacy again of philosophy. There's different legacies, and one of them is the philosophical legacy, the legacy of communication and deep, complex communication. And we're part of that wave, and that's a beautiful place to be. And, we're all part of the legacy, and we're all moving forward, and we're part of the next generation's legacy, and, and what we leave behind, what we have to say, what we add to the complex way of understanding. Keeping the conversation alive is part and parcel of it.
Absolutely spot on. I mean, could I just ask a daft question? I mean, well, how do you feel about death and the place of death within the human sort of experience? And I'll just ask you the question instead of yapping on beforehand.
Again, everything changed when I started to believe that I was a set of systemic modes, not the body of organs, limbs and organs. Okay, that's just a conditioned state. And I genuinely walk around my world like I'm a set of systemic modes engaging with reality. Now, the body dies, but there is no man or woman to die, because in the abstract land, man and woman don't exist. So the body dies. That goes without saying. It's already dying as we speak. It's living and dying as you and I are having conversation. Okay, so the body dies away. But I'm not sitting here wondering if this person called Yap, do I live on when I die? The systemic modes are concerned with the realm it's in on the inside. Does that live on? There is no me to live on. So I look at death in relation to the systemic lens. And the systemic lens doesn't live in a temporary state. It's part of a continuum. It's in a constant state. So it does live on. One of the problems we have is once it's in the individual, it's isolated from itself. It's almost like it's disconnected from source, and it needs to go in after source. So we have this impression of self, the ego, me, and therefore I die. And we are in this state of, oh my God, we die again. So that conditioning has to break to fully start to look at what death might be. We're not part of the equation. So I don't know what happens when this body drops away, whether the mind is strong enough. It certainly continues in other beings. Okay, it's a continuum. Consciousness is a continuum, but consciousness, will it ever wake up in a true? I don't know about reincarnation, but maybe consciousness will wake up in 1,000 years and finally remember it had an impress in a body 1,000 years prior. Now that gives it a new state on the chessboard. What does this mean? What are the implications? It might be 10 million years later before we're fully involved into that understanding and realizing we don't actually die. The systemic mode can wake up in new bodies all the time and know of itself. We don't know. But like I said, death no longer applies to man, woman, to me as body. Death is to do with the system, and the system doesn't die. So the question is, how can it continue to live on and know itself, in previous bodies?
That's interesting, because I mean, a hell of a lot of spirituality that I've encountered still seems obsessed with the individual and contingent facts and names. It's like, what's going to happen to me, and where do I go after this? Where does Matt Gray go into this ultra beyond or whatever? And
sorry, one more point. Sorry.
Sure.
Also to this in relation to death, the sperm hits the ovary and becomes a giraffe or an ant or a spider or a human. Okay, it doesn't understand what it's going to become, but it does. I often think of the system as a more complex systemic sperm, that maybe like on a video game, there's levels, different levels. Okay, so you got level, say Grand Theft Auto, and you got 10 different levels. Okay, and the topology of level 1 is level 2 is more or less the same, but it's slightly different. And the topology of level 3 is more or less the same because you've got the same characters, but it's slightly different because it's more complex. So maybe the mind, maybe we're at a state where semi-aware systemic sperm, and we have to align with the correct headset. So when the body drops away, we plug into the ontology in a dimensional way, and we go into the next realm. And maybe heaven is a system of a state, all different states, new realms, another realm, another realm. So right now, the sperm, where the sperm on is semi-conscious, kind of half awake. Okay, it needs to align because it's going to be pulled in to a new realm when the body's gone that we can't even comprehend. Now, that's just hypothetical. I don't know. I'm just saying, where is this system taking us? To me, the questions of death apply to that because there is no body that can be grounded. There is no me and you. There just isn't. It's a very hard conditioning. We really have to break that conditioning. We keep getting pulled back into that conditioning of self. We really do. Yeah, there's no me. I'm me again. I'm worried about my bills. I'm worried about problems. We're straight back into me. When we want to be serious about ourselves, we have to really let go of it and go, death does not apply to that. That doesn't mean I know. It just doesn't apply to that.
Yeah. And presumably that can give you some comfort.
Again, I've no comfort as me, because I still believe like the system is in me. Now, the system is what it is, and I'm made in the image of the system. I have all its details, okay? So I am the system. But I still had this little fear that maybe there is only 80 years of me. Poor little old me, you know, in the existential sense. Oh, bless, I hope I live on. I love the universe too much. And then the question is, if I do live on, do I want to live on for what? To get laid again, to smoke a spliff again, to watch movies. You know, it's to be engaged with the complexity of it. The complexity is where it's exciting. So nature wants us to keep systemizing. That's what I would love to do. I would love to keep systemizing until I knew the entire ontology of self. Yeah,
that's the sexy bit now.
Yes, that's the sexy bit. Yeah. So is the possibility? The system wants to know itself. I believe that that's the teleological journey of the system, the systemic I. It wants to rise into itself. That's its journey. That thing is alive. That thing, we persist on the back of that. We don't exist. We persist. We didn't cause ourselves to come into being. We persist. We're not in a state of existence. We're in a state of persistence. We persist on the back of the thing that exists. Okay. Is that consciousness? Is that the systemic I, and so on?
So it's sort of you can't just flip into these or sort of switch yourself into these states of mind. Though it takes some discipline, doesn't it, to get to the point that you're at? I'd imagine. You know, you haven't just you didn't just think, oh yeah, here's the truth. You know, this works. It's something you've built up over years, and you know, you're still having to manage those human kind of affectations and so on as well throughout this. Right. So. Yeah. So what would
it takes discipline. It takes discipline.
That's it. Yeah,
years of discipline, years of homework.
And I think a good philosophy does as well, doesn't it? Good anything does, I guess.
Well, I think, you know, the journey to me in philosophy, when I learned enough of Kant to say, all right, that's where I am, and I went looking for me. Once I knew about phenomenology, I went looking for myself. If it squares up in Kant, it squares up in me. If it squares up in me, it squares up in you. That's what I was looking for, something that squared up in us all, the systemic blueprint, right? What squares up in us all? So it's almost like Kant was Bruce Lee, and he taught me enough kung fu moves to go, all right, I get that, but now I want to master what I can do with kung fu. So I'm one of the philosophers who went to my own internal journey. I'm more well studied of self than the philosophers. Yeah, I studied the self. I have been in a state of meditation for years, taking all the structure I knew to be the case and then refining it so I could refine myself, where it's the only access I have to the universe is the inner sense of self. Okay. And by finding my inner sense of self and, you know, drawing parallels with everybody else, I realized these are all the things that are unique to all of us, right? So that's a journey. Now, when I started to find the system, I wrote at the beginning of my book, I didn't go looking for God. I went looking for a system, a blueprint for the mind, if you will, and in it, I found God. Okay? Yeah. So God to me was a Catholic upbringing. I disengaged from that God in the sky. It was ludicrous. I didn't believe in God. I did not believe. I was agnostic. But I was just drawn, this beckoning, calling me just to come. And I followed a certain road, a certain willpower, and I arrived at a system. And when I found a system, I realized, wow, this could be the God I, because it's not us. And if it's not us, it's something else. What are we? And I believe we are this I, like I said. And to me, that's God.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I'm just thinking, I've just got my sausage sandwich. I wonder whether we could perhaps draw this to a close for now.
Yes, all right, fabulous. Yes, because I really enjoyed chatting to you, Matt. Really enjoyed it. Yeah,
it's been fantastic. That's 2 hours roughly, and that's just literally flown by.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah. Well, look, I look forward to meeting in the real world. I intend to get down to the
come on down. I mean, if you could make it to the social, that would be fantastic.
Yes,
you know, might be able to put you up. Actually, I better talk to the.
I'm happy to try. I have to get back for my son, but when is the social on? When is it happening? The gathering?
I'll email you afterwards with the exact date. But it's not this. It's not next week, but the week after. But we've got there's the Chelsoph Zoom next week if you're interested in joining that.
I won't do a Zoom with groups, you know.
Yeah.
It does. It just I get too many people. But anyway, it's my own issue.
I'm kind of a little bit the same. It's probably going to be total chaos.
And the social the week after, the 21st, I have a gathering in my house, I think on the 21st. I have a gathering on the 21st. So if it's the 21st, I can't make that one, but I will come down to one in the week and meet you.
Dude, it's been such a massive pleasure talking to you. I just sense that there's so much else we could go into at some point in the future. So that's something to look forward to as well.
Well, I look forward to that. I look forward to it. Yeah. Great to say hello properly. Yeah.
Take care of yourself, man.
You too. Enjoy the sausage sandwich.
Thank you very much. I certainly shall. Cheers, dude. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Oh, hang on. I'm still here.
That's all right, yeah. Now, the awkward moments of disconnect.
Yeah, they're weird, aren't they?
You can make faces.
Yeah.
I'll let you switch it on.
Take care. It's real pleasure, man. Take care.
Yeah, take care, man.